Hey, everybody. Welcome to another installment of 15 Minutes with Andy as we continue to find positivity in our world and stories that we hope you enjoy and stories. We have a wide variety of terrific guests that have been on and kind of told their story and how they got from A to B, and a lot of times it's not that easy how they got A to B. C, D, and E got involved before they got back to B. So we hope you're enjoying all of these podcasts. We are in season number 2, and we're glad to be joined by Allen Rutter, who is the executive director now of Shalom Counseling and Mediation. Allen, thanks for taking time to do this podcast with me.
Well, you're welcome, Andy. It's great to be with you, and I'm glad to be here and be a part of this. I know you've been doing these podcasts, and they're well received, and just honored to be one of your guests.
Tell us, I guess let's go back to the beginning. Where does Allen Rutter's story begin?
That's a really big question there, Andy. So, it's kind of fascinating for me, at least. I don't know if it connects with others, but I have a little sign at home that says "Your story begins at home," and I think home is really where obviously all of us started, and home is such a special place. But, that journey for me, I was born in Colorado, and my dad worked in the uranium mines. And when I was just a couple years old, we moved out to the state of Oregon. And my dad, he had an anger problem. And so he'd get upset at his boss or a coworker or a neighbor, and next thing I knew, we were moving again. So I went to 14 different schools.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wow. Right. Wow. I mean,
you hear about 14 different schools and you automatically think, well, it must be a military kid because they're always on the move, but this had nothing to do with that. No. It
really, and we'll tie back into this a little bit later maybe as we talk here with each other, because, growing up with a parent that had an anger problem and a really serious drinking problem, and just us moving all the time. I mean, seriously, there are times that we'd come home from school or something, and we were all packed into our car moving. We were just leaving. And what we couldn't get in our 62 Chevy Bel Air 4-door, we left. And we started all over again. Moved to a town where I had never heard of before and people I didn't know. And so it was tough. And the other thing about it is there were 9 kids in this family.
I was just going to say, you said we, so...
Yeah, 9 kids. And I don't know, I hope no one's offended by this, but we were born like 9 months and 30 minutes apart.
Yeah.
I mean, we were that close. It was just outrageous. And so, I was always the new kid in school and just moving around constantly. And I want to say right now that my dad eventually did get more in touch with his anger, and he stopped drinking, and we for a long time had a great relationship. But I'm just going to be honest, it was kind of an abusive situation for us. And so I moved around a lot in Oregon and in the state of Oregon, and I love the state. It's a great place. But got kind of settling in a little bit. Then I was a senior in high school, we moved back to Missouri where my dad had grown up. And there's where I finished my high school years, just as a senior in high school. In fact, I was in 2 different schools there because I won't go into that story, but I was in one of the schools for just part of the first day, and my dad got upset about something, and we pulled us out of that school and went to a different one.
What does that do to you and your siblings? I guess, where did you feel like you suffered the most? Physically, emotionally? Probably you're end up saying all of the above, but where did it affect you the most?
Yeah, and there was physical abuse, there was, that was really painful, but I think the emotional part of it was really the most difficult. And it really, I would say that I grew up being a pretty angry and bitter young man, and was actually got arrested on some stuff, and so even in the work I do now, I really understand where a lot of people are coming from. And I think the most significant thing there is to understand that transformation can happen, and that in spite of how we are raised or grow up, we don't have to stay there. And so, it's been an incredible journey for me. I think the other thing that was such an anchor for me, and more than anything else, is my mother. She was just a saint. She did communicate love, and I never really felt that from my father, but from my mom, I knew I had value and loved and accepted. And when you're moving around all the time and you're always the new kid and not being a part of a significant group for an extended period of time, that I think that's one of the things I've really learned in life, is that it's a basic human need to belong, to just know that you belong somewhere and that you have value and you are loved. And that's one thing that my mother did is incredible. She held everything together. And so, I moved, to Missouri then, and it took me a couple of years even out of high school to get my stuff together. I graduated at the bottom of my class, and was probably reading on a second or third grade level, just because I got messed up with a lot of drugs and stuff, and didn't care about anything. I was going nowhere fast and didn't really care about stuff, so. But this is the other thing, you're talking in your podcast about positivity and good things in our world. And that was the thing that really turned things around for me more than anything, is that I started connecting with a family. It was a large family, too, with 8 kids, and this mom and dad in this family, they welcomed me like their son, and I have no idea how many chicken dinners I sat down with them on Sunday afternoon, and just that belonging and that unconditional acceptance and love and affirmation, and we had so much fun together, and I just realized that that life is good and we can have direction and purpose. And so, that's what happened. And
were those your teen years when you discovered or found this family?
Well, it was like, when we moved to Missouri, that family was there. And so I was deeply connected with that family. I still am really close to that family. The Johnstons, amazing, wonderful people, and others in that small community. So, I think that was just a real turning point for me in my life there.
So, obviously those teen years, and you said those can be they're tough anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, they're tough even if you're the most well-adjusted kid in the school and don't move and don't have what you had to deal with.
Yeah, right.
So you meet this family. When did you start to find, how did you start to find some purpose in life and realize I better get my stuff together here, or I need to?
Yeah, well, I think that, those were persons of deep faith too. And so, I started looking into that a lot more deeply and trying to understand their joy, their meaning, their purpose, their sense of, peace. And so, it was really a faith journey for me, and went to church with them and just really decided to turn things around for me.
Were you the only one? Were any of your siblings coming along with this, or was this Allen on his own?
No, there's a couple of my siblings that, at this church we were going to, there was a lot of that acceptance there and welcoming. So, I think that it impacted, at that time, out of the 9 siblings here, the 8 siblings, myself there were 5 of us at that point, so the 4 older ones had moved out of home. And it impacted our family in a pretty significant way.
Okay. Alan's 17, 18 now. You're 17, 18.
Yeah.
What are you doing now? You're an adult, so what are you
Yeah,
what are you doing?
well, I left home then after high school when I turned 18, and actually 2 of these guys and we rented an old farmhouse, and we were bachelors together. We called it Dad's Place. It was David, Alan, and Danny. We called it Dad's Place. And that's where, and this is rural Missouri. We had a big farmhouse. It was a really cool old farmhouse, and we paid $60 a month rent for it. So it was $20, So, yeah, I got a job working at an agrico business. So I was delivering anhydrous, wagons and fertilizers to farmers and stuff. And that was one of my first jobs there, and I did that for a year. And then actually, I started driving school bus. The superintendent of the high school that I graduated from called me up and wanted to know if I'd drive school bus. Like I'm a 18-and-a-half-year-old kid, and I look at that now and I think, what was that guy thinking? But, it was responsibility given to me and trust that people put in me, and I've always taken that really seriously. And so, yeah, I started doing that, and then there was an older guy in the community that I was good friends with, and he had a chicken house with 11,000 laying hens in it. And he was ready to retire and get out of the business, so I started doing that. And so I had 11,000 chicks that I took care of, or hens, and drove school bus. And that's during that time when I met my wife and we got married and really, really started going in a completely different direction with my life.
I was going to say, how important was that to you and where you were at, becoming not a bachelor anymore? Now you're a husband with a wife. Yeah. And it sounds like you're working jobs. And you didn't want to probably do the chicken thing or the bus driving thing forever, I would assume. Yeah. What was the next step then now to finding a career, and how important was your wife coming into your story?
Oh, she was key. She still is. She's just such an anchor, in my life, and just an incredibly solid person. And, for her life was so different. Her dad was a pastor, and, she went to the same school from K through 12, and just incredibly rooted in the community, and a lot of stability, and just also a person of deep faith. And so, yeah, that was just, it all came together for me, and I think that it was really powerful. So yeah, we had, at that time, my youngest brother was killed in an auto accident. It really impacted me in a pretty significant way too. And so we were in the chicken business for a couple of years, and that was when there was, like right now, there was a huge bird flu thing that went around and wiped out a bunch of chicken houses. And so that was a tough market for a while there. And I was offered a job in a grocery store and in her home community, because at that point we were up in northeast Missouri and she came from the central part down around the Lake of the Ozarks. And so we were kind of looking at making a change, and we did. And then I became the manager of a fairly good-sized grocery business, and I did that for 6 or 7 years, and we were, really setting down our roots in that community. But one of the things I didn't say is that about the time, well, in fact, even before I was married, I and Dave and Dan and some others, we would go down to the state penitentiary and do some prison ministry. And that was really cool work. And I decided in doing that, that one of the things, just learning about incarceration and challenges that people have faced there in the criminal justice system, I talked to the chaplain down there and some of the administration in this facility. And I said, what these people need is when they get out of here, where do they go? And, they many times go right back into that negative community and with their negative peers and stuff like that. And I said, I'd be interested in having someone released into my custody on probation, as they get paroled out, and we can bring them into Dad's place. And so we did that, And that was a really interesting journey there.
How many?
And so I just did one,
Okay.
but I helped facilitate a couple others.
Okay.
And but that was the learning experience too. And so I've stayed connected with that guy. He's really turned his life around, and so
was the prison ministry what eventually led you to becoming a pastor?
Yeah, I would speak at those, in some Bible studies and stuff like that, and conduct some services there, and so here I'm like a 20-year-old doing this kind of stuff, and 21-year-old, and
intimidating.
Yeah, it was a little bit, walking down some of the corridors and having other guys whistle at me, thinking and I'm like, what's going on here, and so it was really opening up my eyes to a completely different world. But yeah, and then as I started stepping out in some leadership roles like that, and there's a lot of affirmation for that, and some of my speaking gifts and leadership stuff, and so I had a lot of affirmation for that, and so yeah, we were married and settling into that community, and still involved with prison ministry and some other stuff in our local congregation. And people came to me and said, "You ought to consider being a pastor." And that was pretty formative for me, and I decided to explore that. So here it was, about 10 years after high school, that I went in and took an SAT test and prepared to go to college. And that was pretty intimidating for me too, because I remember my high school performance, my academics. But yeah, so it was really, really incredible. I think, one of the other things too, Andy, that I'm very aware of is that that affirmation and encouragement to dream and tap into your gifts and who you are. And if you're growing up in a family where there's a lot of support for that kind of stuff, it's really true that you can dream and fulfill your dreams. I know that can be like cliche sometimes, but that wasn't my experience. So I had a lot of self-doubt. I had a lot of, questions about that, and can I do this? What I discovered when I went to college was that I'm a pretty smart guy. And I don't mind saying that because, I never got anything but an A in any of my classwork. In fact, professors asked me to do a little bit of tutoring. They asked me to be an assistant and grade the papers of students and stuff, and was asked by the president to speak at the commencement exercise, and it was such a growing, stretching time for me, I even took one of my early classes was a kind of a remedial writing class. And so, the prof said, "What are you doing in this class?" And so I've always been kind of a storyteller. When you grow up with 8 siblings, you have to be a storyteller, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of stories.
Yeah.
And so, that was cool. And so I had a lot of affirmation there too, and decided that I'm going to pursue ministry. And so, I got a degree in pastoral ministry, and then later went to seminary, and so that's how I ended up in Ohio too.
I was going to say, so did you have a congregation in Missouri and then came to Ohio, or was your first one here in Northwestern?
Well, I did a short stint to fill in for a pastor who was going to go on an extended sabbatical in Milford, Nebraska, which was right about 30 miles, maybe 25 miles west of Lincoln. So everybody out there are Cornhuskers,
Mm-hmm.
And I've never seen such crazy fans. I was being the pastor there, but we couldn't do a Bible study, or we couldn't do anything when it was a Nebraska game.
I've heard that.
It's like, man, it doesn't matter how old you are or anything. You're wearing red, but that was fun, and so I did that, and then I continued my education and then was called to this church here at Stryker, the Lockport Mennonite Church.
Did you know anything about Northwest Ohio? Northwest Ohio, certainly not Stryker, but did you know anything about Ohio, period?
No, I didn't. No, it didn't. And, so
What year was that, by the way? When the
It was
Stryker?
in 88.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you come here.
Yeah.
And father yet?
Yeah. We had, and that's really a cool part of my story is just, and I think, positive too, is that the congregation was so loving and accepting and affirming and just really a great thing. And now my wife's parents, they were living in Kansas. My parents had moved back out to Oregon. And so our times of getting together with grandparents was pretty limited. But the congregation, there are a lot of folks there that became like grandparents to our girls. And so when we moved here, my oldest daughter was in the 3rd grade and my youngest daughter was going into the 1st grade. And so it was a gift to have them be able to be in one place through that educational process.
Especially of all the moving that you had done.
Yeah,
I'm sure that was at the top of your list of importance now that you're a dad.
Absolutely was. Just really, really meaningful to me. And other people not knowing the story or having experienced it, they take that for granted. I think that's one of the things that we've got to recognize about our communities here that we live in is that we just really cannot take for granted the way these communities are bonded together, and there's so much good in our communities. And, so that was really an important thing for me. But here's the thing, I guess, moving forward a little bit and changing my vocation. And I was a pastor there for about 19 years. And I don't know why. I mean, obviously, I took some classes at the seminary and in college on helping relationships and pastoral care and things like that. So, and it was all kind of fascinating to me because it's a journey of healing and wellness. And, I had a lot of healing and a lot of growing to do in my own life and dealing with my stuff. And so, I think I've always been an approachable person. And understanding grace and forgiveness and acceptance. And so it wasn't completely surprising to me that people in the congregation would come to me with some of their stuff they wanted to work on. I mean, all pastors do that, but I just felt like that I didn't have a degree in counseling, and so I didn't want to mess anybody's life up either,
Yeah.
And so I was a part of a ministerial association, and there was a guy in our congregation that was a therapist, and we had a great relationship with each other, and he was working for a large agency and was thinking about going into private practice and was asking me about setting up an office in our church. And I said, well, I think there's probably a lot of churches that could use this, and a faith-based, kind of counseling place. And he really wanted to just be the lone guy, and so I had him come to this ministerial association and share his vision, and he bombed in his presentation. It was just horrible. He was so abstract and all over the place, and it wasn't him at his best. And so after he left, I asked the group if they would like to, kind of partner with him and put something together, and they said no, not really. They just didn't think he would be the right guy for it. And I said, well, I think there's still an issue, a problem, and I think there's a need. And so they said, well, why don't you start a committee and see what you put together. So I worked with 2 other pastors for about 2 years to put a thing together called Shalom.
Talk about how that began. Shalom Counseling Mediation, where it began, how it began, what was that vision once you guys got beyond. I mean, he had a good idea. There were seedlings there of the good idea. The pastor you said that bombed the gentleman that bombed the presentation, you knew what he wanted to get at. So now what are you coming together with these other pastors to make this vision become a reality?
Yeah. So, yeah, we were really interested in starting something, and it was my conviction that we didn't want to just hire a therapist and put him in a church. I had a much bigger vision than that, and felt really strongly that, and I need to back up and say too, Andy, that I think through my own journey and different classes I took in college and at seminary, I've been really, I was really attracted to this idea of restorative justice, and that has gained a lot of traction across the United States. Restorative justice as a particular discipline and field that works within the criminal justice system. And so, it's really about seeking peace and restoring people's lives, but also caring deeply about the victims. And so I felt like that it was a justice issue to make this available to a much broader, audience and demographic than just having an office in a church. And I think there are pastors that are pastoral counselors, and I think there are a lot of churches that do that, and I'm not kicking against that, but it's not what I wanted, because what the problem with that is there's a lot of people that have issues with the church. And I don't think that the vision that we were given in the scriptures is that we build an empire or we build some place and have people come to us. I don't think that's what Jesus did in the New Testament. He went out to the people. And so I felt really strongly that just having one person doing this in one of our buildings was not the best approach. And I felt really strongly that we needed to have an organization, an agency, that's not just dependent upon a person. And so that there's a whole structure that's there that can provide that. And so we worked with Adriel School for about 5 years. For some of the administrative oversight, we were chartered then as a 501c3 organization, faith-based organization. And we, along with beginning to offer mental health counseling, we also did what was called a victim offender reconciliation program, which is part of that restorative justice model. And so we started doing that, where we were bringing people together, victims and offenders together, to work at restoration, reconciliation, restitution. And so we've always had that as a part of our organization too, which brings the mediation services into what we do. So we are known as Shalom Counseling and Mediation Center. We wanted to use this word shalom because it's a lot of people think that that's a Hebrew word, right? Yeah, it is. It is, and they think, what does that mean? Well, peace. But it's not just peace. It really means everything is well. Everything is good. And so when you think about our relationship with the environment, you think about our relationship within our family systems, within our communities, it really is just this incredibly broad word that has so many multiple meanings to it. And so if we even think about the creation story from a biblical point of view, when we read in the creation that God created the heavens and the earth, and at the end of each day of that creating, God stepped back and said, with a deep breath, I guess, this is good. Mm-hmm. This is good. And I think that's what is at the heart of Shalom, is we know that there's a lot of brokenness, a lot of pain, a lot of conflict, a lot of incongruities in life, and dysfunction, or in the medical community we think about disease, which just simply means not at ease. And so shalom is a great word that when we do our best, that people come in with this with things at dis-ease, not at peace, but when they are done, they say, oh my gosh, life is good. I'm good. This is good. And I think that's what we want people to experience. And so as you hear my story, you can understand that that's kind of my journey. And I look at my life and I just think, oh my gosh, it's so good. Mm. It's so good. I mean, I am so at peace. And I work with people that are at peace. I just surround myself with people that are at peace and that see life as really good. And, I kind of guess it comes back to your podcast, right? Mm-hmm. Andy Briggle, this is about positivity and what
hope.
Hope. And we can look around and there's plenty of sad stuff going on. I get that. It breaks my heart. There's so much division in the world. There's so much strife and brokenness and people that are searching for a place to belong. And, it's my story. But it's also been for these last,
how many years?
40 years,
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to admit it, but I'm going to be 65 this summer. And the reality is that, my life is good.
So Shalom, a lot of changes. I mean, we could probably do a podcast just on changes and what. Yeah. So the changes you started where you started, and then it was only one location, now 2 locations, and new locations for both their agencies in Archibald and in Bryan. Yeah. But not just that, and adding therapists and great people that are doing great work. The mental health field in general has changed from when you first opened those doors to where we're at now.
Yeah. And I think, coming back to some of those changes, when I started there 15 years ago, we had one therapist that worked 12 hours a week and one that worked 16 hours a week. And we have 17 therapists now. We would do maybe 180 sessions a year, and this year we're going to probably do 14,000. And we have space issues. We were downtown here, and we've always had an office in Bryan, and always one in Archibald, but we were basically just doing the victim offender reconciliation work in Bryan in our office. And so then for us to start doing counseling and bringing counselors in here, and when Stephanie Rocky came on board, she was one of our first real full-time therapists. She was doing contract work with us, but she's like carrying a caseload that's crazy. And that really helped us. And being right across from the courthouse and building relationships in the community here has just really been amazing. When you do good work, the word gets out. But we were down there and had just 2 counseling rooms and a play therapy room. And we completely outgrew that space. And the demand was great, and so we said to our board said we got to get into something bigger and something more permanent, because we had been moving around over here in Bryan. We were in 6 different locations in Bryan, and just trying to find a place. And so when we bought what was the Rodney Lotes chiropractic building, I was like, oh my gosh, look at this space. And
was that a full circle moment? I mean, and I bring that up because you talked about you moved a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt like that feels like to me as you're saying that now you have a home in Archibald and a home in Bryan metaphorically now.
Yeah,
for
exactly. I mean, it was for me, and I even said to our board, Shalom board, I said, look, we move out of this place at 108 West High Street. We're going to move into some place that's going to meet our needs for an extended period of time. I said, at least until I retire. We're not moving again. So we got to get into a really good quality place and space and something that's going to accommodate our growth. Mm-hmm. We moved in there. We went from having these 2 counseling rooms to having 10 counseling rooms. And in less than 2 years, we were maxed out and hiring additional therapists and stuff. And So, yeah, that growth it just exploded. And, the other thing, too, about that story, about even the vision initially for Shalom, about us taking it out into the community. So we're in a number of different schools providing therapy now, too. And we've been into some businesses providing therapy, out off-site, out on location. And I think that's a part of our strategic plan, too, is that so rather than just building, bigger buildings and stuff, how can we get out in the community? And so that's really cool to do that.
What's next? What's next for Shalom? I mean, I didn't ask your age. You willingly brought it up, Allen. So the end of your work life at some point will come when you can enjoy your retirement years. What do you want to do before that?
Well,
or what do you want Shalom to
we've got a
accomplish?
really aggressive strategic plan, the Shalom board does now, because we've outgrown our space over in Archbold, too. When we bought that building, and I'll just tell you that it's amazing. I'll drop Ross Wise's name here. He used to be the sales exec there at Souter Woodworking for years, and he's a real salesman. And he came into my office over in Archbold one day, and he says to me, hey, we got this building that's coming up for sale out by Souter Village, and he said, it's a nice building. It's only 7 years old, and it's coming up for an absolute auction. He said, when are you going to buy that? And I said, Ross, we can't buy a building. We are leasing a place there downtown, and I said, man, we can't buy that place. We got like $7 in our checking account. I mean, literally, that was true, And I was like, we can't buy a building. He said, no, we're going to buy that. And so, we brought in our financial treasurer and from our board, who is incredibly great with money and he's we can't buy that building. Ross said, no, we're going to buy that building. And so in a month, we raised enough money to buy the building.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we reached out to people. And that actually happened to us over here in Bryan, too. But our aggressive strategic plan is we want to finish off the basement in our location here on County Road 15 in Bryan. It's a big open space, 5,200 square feet down there. Has never been finished, and we want to. We've got a capital campaign that sometime here this year we're going to launch, and we want to remodel that space. And we have to do something over in Archbold, too. When we went in there with that building, we had just a couple counseling rooms. We had to turn our conference room into a counseling room and another office space into a counseling room. And so we've outgrown that space over there, too. But we're going to have to do something over there, add on. And so we're in the process of looking exactly what our needs are. That's
a good bad thing, too. I mean, it's a good thing in the fact that it's there, and you have such great staff that do such a terrific job. But also, I guess the bad part of it is that we need, and not bad. That's a poor choice of words, because we've gotten the stigma placed off or taken off of mental health issues.
I think so.
And we're continuing to make grounds. But I guess when I use the word bad, I was thinking that the need is there and it's so prevalent now. But it's the way of the world. Well,
and I'm not. I understand exactly where you're coming from. I would frame it this way, and that is that there's a lot of need, and that presents a lot of opportunity. So I look at everything through this opportunity lens, and there's so much need and opportunity, and we're not competing against other organizations, because I'm a huge collaborator, and I'm thankful for the relationships that we have with, recovery services, with the courts, with JFS, with, a renewed mind, with Maumee Valley. And so, yeah. And the other thing, too, that is so incredibly inspiring and really humbling to me, too, Andy, is our fiscal year starts on July 1. And so from July 1 to date here at Shalom, we've received over $250,000 worth of donations to help people in need. Now, we also, we're in network with most insurance companies, and we do services for Medicaid clients. And but there is so much support for us in the community, and it's such an honor to be entrusted with that. There's a lot of trust that's placed in us, and to be good stewards of that is really a high commitment on my part to know that, and to be the steward of that generosity. It's so amazing. But yeah, it's going to take a lot of community support to get us in some of these new, remodels and some of the new construction we're going to have to do to continue to meet the need. But we also are working hard at going out from our buildings, And the other thing I'm so inspired by is the deep sense of care. I can sit down and talk to a therapist or think about a new employee, and we always want to talk about what do we do? What are your qualifications? What are all these things? And this is what you do, right? I do drug and alcohol addictions counseling. I do this, and I would, but the most important question for me is not what you do, but why do you do it? And so that's the key thing. And I think the thing that I'm most keenly aware of with our staff is that they care. They really are doing this because they care about people. And
yeah. And that makes a world of difference. And people know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, too, to care for oneself is critical, too. So self-care, and that's tough in this therapeutic environment, that therapists are always pouring their compassion and their deep care for people, but you have to be a person that cares for yourself, too. And I think as a director there, that's a huge calling of mine, is to care for our therapists. 40
years ago, you're hitching and loading everything up to come to a journey of the unknown in Northwest Ohio. I'd say it's been a pretty beneficial thing for Allen Rutter and his family.
Yeah, it has been.
Amazing thing.
It is. And I'm so proud, too, of my family and my son-in-laws and my grandkids and the relationships that we have with people. It's just such... It just comes back to that thing, of it's so good. It's so good. And it's positive. And, we can focus on that negative stuff. But, and I think, too, that's one of the things I often find myself going back to when I hear people complain and you may be working with some truancy mediation case or some kid that's doing some dumb things like I was in high school, and not caring about anything or a drug addict. But I think, wait a minute, just look at how many parents are doing an incredible job. Look at the parents and the schools and the athletics and what's going on in our community with our parks and the world we live in. It is so beautiful and so wonderful. Yeah,
you can always. Sometimes you got to look a little deeper, but you can still find the good.
Yeah, and I think just that mindfulness, and I often tell people that I start my day with about 10 minutes in the morning, saying, today, I want to be a person of kindness. Today, I'm going to be a person of compassion. Today, I'm going to be a person of understanding. I'm going to be a person who accepts and is fully present with whoever I meet. And that's
the world needs more of those 10 minutes. I really believe that. That's an amazing way.
Yeah, because I'm just like everybody else. I get upset at stuff.
Sure.
I see crap going on, but I just say, nope, not me.
That's great. That's awesome. Again, like I said, that's a great way to end the podcast is to talk about that. About we all can do that, and we all should consider doing that. I've got some fun questions for you. Are you good with that?
Yeah, whatever.
All right. And by the way, if you're listening and listening to this for the first time, Alan doesn't have a clue what I'm going to ask him, which makes this even more fun. What's your favorite word?
Kindness.
What's your least favorite word?
Hate.
What sound or noise do you love?
Silence.
Just kind of stillness?
Yeah. Silence.
Unfortunately, in a podcast, we can't have too much of that.
I know, but I'm just telling you that if we don't take time to listen, we got to do that. Just silence, because out of our silence is the only hope for intelligent speech.
Sound or noise that you dislike?
Yeah, I want to say whether it's an animal or a person, the sound of being hurt, a squeal, a cry, a slap.
And we all know that. Yeah, we all know that sound or have felt that sound.
Yeah.
What profession, other than the one that you have, would you like to try or have had that in the back of your mind? I'd always wanted to do that and just didn't get around to it or just didn't do it. What other profession would you like to attempt?
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth sometimes to thinking about a doctor or an attorney. And I'm not sure why, but only through the lens of a helping relationship.
Okay. Last one, and I guess this is kind of be a personal, it's personal. How would you like to be remembered? Also, / if somebody's finding this podcast, what would you like them to have as the takeaway? So maybe that can be the same answer.
Yeah, I think that probably just that he cared.
That's that's a simple way of just saying it. Whatever it was, he cared. And quite a journey from where we began this podcast and your story to where you're at. Boy, that is I think I said A to B.
Yeah.
You didn't have that straight line.
Yeah. No.
And that's okay too. Yeah. Allen Rutter, thank you for being kind enough to share your morning with me here and talk and record this podcast. You guys are doing a great job at Shalom Counseling and Mediation, and I know that will continue as well. So thanks for spending a little time with us and our listeners here to this podcast. Yeah,
you're welcome. And, I think we said earlier about, where I'll be going. And the thing that is so hopeful to me is to know that they always do their best work when I'm not there.
I don't know that they'd say that either.
Well, I do, because that is where it happens. It doesn't happen in the executive director's office. It happens, when people walk down that hall. That's sacred space. And so, just knowing that, whenever I retire, it's going to go. And that's really cool.
It's a talented, compassionate, loving and caring staff you have. There's no doubt about that. And it starts there at the top too and funnels all the way down, I know.
Well, thank you, Andy.
Allen Rutter, our guest here on 15 Minutes with Andy. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be listening for our next installment. Have yourself a great day, a positive day, and I think to piggyback on what Allen has talked in this podcast, do it with kindness today as well.